the availability of $160 billion $160 billion for COVID vaccinations and other treatments for, they say, over 1 billion people in what they're saying at this point are developing nations. The real goal and oppression on people's freedoms, I think, is only just beginning. This is all prep stuff for what's coming. I got to go to here now. Twila, I want to start with masking here at this point before we go into the vaccinations. The masking has been out there first. It's visible. The vaccinations are coming down the road, as we'll find out. But research just came out. Just last night, a 24-year-old friend of mine told me that he had posted on Facebook material taken right off of the CDC website showing that approximately 70% of people testing positive for COVID were pretty avid maskers. And only a very small percentage of those that tested positive, they never wore a mask or hardly ever wear a mask. So big issue. But then within an hour, Facebook, their newly imposed fact checkers, marked it as false news, even though he took it right off of the CDC website. So this tells me we got big issues here. So what does the latest research that you have seen, Twila, what's it say about masking information, and why are they working so hard to bury it or discredit it?
Well, I have to say, and you probably understand it as well as your listeners, that just because Facebook or Twitter banned something doesn't mean that it isn't true. As we even found out with the Hunter Biden story yesterday, right? One of the biggest publications in the whole world, and it gets banned by Twitter, as though it was, just some, little publication somewhere. And so what that CDC study is a really important study because it looked at about 330 people, and 154 of them were cases. In other words, they were actually symptomatic and they had COVID. The other 160 had symptoms, but they were not COVID, so they probably had the flu or something, right? And so what they found is that 70.6% of those with COVID were, for the 14 days before they got symptoms, for those 14 days, they always wore a mask, 70.6%. Another 14.4% of those who got COVID often wore a mask during those 14 days before their symptoms came. So what we're really talking about here is that 85% of this sample, which came from 11 healthcare systems around the country that they looked at people from around 11 and they pulled them all together. What they found is 85% of them often or always wore masks before they got symptoms and turned up with COVID. That is a lot of people wearing masks that aren't helping.
That is a big deal. Now, we got to get into the vaccination, but very practically speaking, what then does that show? I mean, it's apparent to me kind of what it shows. They don't do any good, which is exactly what you've been saying. But this is a very significant statistics that ought to change policies. But is it?
Right. And so I can see some of the people on the other side saying, well, the real problem is that the other people weren't wearing masks. They were amongst other people who weren't wearing masks. And now we either have to agree that the mask itself, the material of the mask, and either it protects you or it doesn't. So either that material works or it doesn't. It's not about other people. And scientists have said cloth masks don't work for source control, which means to protect others, and they don't work for PPE, personal protective equipment. Two researchers out of Chicago, and that is posted on the University of Minnesota website, and they were challenged, and they refused to take that down. So, the reality is if you even get a box of masks from the hospital, it will say on there, this does not protect you from viruses. Well, it doesn't, having somebody else wear a mask doesn't protect the other people either, because the mask it's not magic. Okay, so anyway, it should change policy, but as Dr. Osterholm said, people are acting based on emotion rather than on science.